My gosh, I've become my mother. Have you ever had that moment too? Perhaps it's something that comes out of your mouth, or a mannerism, or a gesture, or the way that you react to something. There's a point in our adult life when women realize that they have become their mothers, even when they said they wouldn't. And it's more than just their eye color, their hair color, or their features that they've adopted and inherited, but those things that are much deeper. The way that our mother handled conflict, the way that she loved, the way that she handled her pain, the way that she never asked for support. Her patterns is what we have inherited. This is the topic for today's episode. So stay with me and we'll dive straight in. Welcome to Higher Self Mastery, the podcast for women ready to leave behind who they were told to be and remember who they truly are. I'm your host, Dharmi Schumacher. This is your space to come home to yourself, to honor the inner pull for more truth and more depth, and more meaning as you enter a new chapter of your life. Together, we're reframing midlife crisis into the midlife magic that it actually is, because this is your rebirth. Through soulful conversations and spiritual tools, you'll reconnect to your truth and reclaim your voice and live the life that your soul came here for. So let's begin. So today's episode, I think so many of you will be able to relate to. So I'm married, I'm a wife, and I'm also a mother. And this is a topic that has revealed itself to me slowly but surely in these two different relationships of my life, and for sure in other areas of my life as well, but certainly in my marriage and certainly in my relationship with my daughter, how I parent. And it just got me thinking how many times I had said to myself growing up, maybe as a teenager or as a young adult, I won't do that. I won't be that person. And for different things, right? And we'll break these down in a moment. But just areas of my mum's life that I felt like I didn't want to repeat and how I wanted to do certain things differently. Yet fast forward 10 or 20 years from that point, from when I've had those internal conversations with myself, I find myself and catch myself doing the very things that I said that I wouldn't do. And in those moments, I'm like, oh my gosh, how? How did I get here? Now, we'll explain the how as well in a moment. But I think a lot of you listening today will be like, oh my gosh, yes, me too. Absolutely. Why do we do that? Or I've noticed it, or maybe you haven't noticed it yet, but this is going to get you thinking. So I invite you to keep an open mind and do some exploration as well as this topic unfolds. So long before we began to educate ourselves through books or podcasts or coaches or therapy and start to make sense of the world, our very first teacher for most of us was our mother, especially for us women. Now, this is true for most of us, irrespective of the relationship that we may have had with our mothers. So whether that was joyful or whether it was distant or whether that was loving or whether it was painful, just because of that biological bond that we have and that emotional bond that we have and the energetic bond, I would say as well, with our mothers, because her having birthed us, they become our first and foremost, our number one role model for life. And as women, not just for how to be a human being, how to be a person, but how to be a woman. And we watch through her eyes. We end up living through her behaviors. So we learn how to love based on how we watch our mothers loving. We learn how to handle conflict based on what our mothers did during a time of conflict. We learn whether to ask for support or not, or whether to carry all the burden or not, or to share that. Or we learned how to put our own needs down and squash them inside of us as if they don't matter in order to serve in the name of love. And the list is long, right? But so often, especially I think in the era that many of us will have grown up, and our parents being of the generation of like the 50s and the 40s perhaps, it was a very different way of being. It was a very different way of living, and a very different way of being a woman as well, which we are now undoing and breaking those cycles. And this is not about blaming how our mothers did things. Never, 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 never. We first and foremost need to honor our mothers, because for those of you listening who are mums, know it's the most difficult responsibility, the most challenging job title that we will ever carry and wear. And just when you think you are doing a decent job, there's always a curveball thrown in, and it all gets turned upside down as well. So it is the most challenging yet rewarding role that we may play in our lives. So this is definitely not about blaming what our parents have done or what our mothers have done. They did the best that they could with what they had, with their capacity, right? And sometimes that may have fallen short, for sure, in certain circumstances. But even for those of us who had mothers who were very present, who were very loving, there are still going to be aspects of how they raised us or how they lived their life. This is more about how they lived their own lives, and we have now come to model. And the reason we model this is because as children, we are not mature enough or have the conscious awareness to be able to distinguish that there are different ways of doing things. What we see demonstrated in front of us, especially by our mother, is what we take to be law, is what we take to be truth. And so how our mothers will have done things during those very vulnerable and impressionable years, it becomes a part of our subconscious programming for how to do life as well, and how to be a partner, how to be a mother, but also, yes, how to just be a human being as well, and how to show up as a woman in this world. And a child cannot see or discern or have the knowledge and understanding to be able to see their mothers and say, oh my gosh, my mother is abandoning herself. My mother is becoming exhausted at the cost of her own needs and her own desires and her own health, just to satisfy everybody else around her. That she is shrinking herself, playing small, silencing her voice perhaps, that she is not expressing her needs. All of those different things, we don't see that as a child. We just see it so simply as fact. And whatever is playing out in front of us, we take that on to be truth. And then later on, that is what we end up repeating in our own patterns as well. However, in between, as we do grow up in our teenage years or as young adults, and we continue to witness our mothers, perhaps, we may turn around and say, oh my gosh, like, why does she do that? Why doesn't she stop doing that? Why doesn't she put herself first? Certainly speaking for myself, my mother very much has grown up in a culture and a generation where it is expected for the wife, the mother, to be in full service to her family and to put her own needs last, to almost behave as if she has no needs, right? And that is a sign of a good mother. That is a sign of a good wife. That is a sign of a dutiful daughter and all of those things. So it's almost this way, this identity, you're squashing down everything you are inside to fulfill this expectation from your culture and your society. And I know it's not just in my culture. I know it's not just of that generation. It exists in so many different ways, but this is just an example too. And so in my particular case, I watched my mom never, ever put her own needs before anybody else's, even when it pained her, even when it upset her, even though sometimes it was so clear she wanted to do something different or didn't agree with what was happening in front of her. Ultimately, she silenced her voice and her opinions and prioritized those of her family. She also was somebody who took on all the responsibility and all the burden and juggled everything and did everything for everyone, like served, and the more she served us, that was her way of showing love, but at a cost to herself, at a cost to her physical health, at a cost to her own needs and her rest and her having any kind of life of her own. And this very much became apparent when we all left home. You know, my sister got married, she moved out of home. I never really came back full time after left for university. I moved around from city to city, was doing my own independent thing. And there was a reluctance in my mother to let me go because she was going through that empty nest syndrome. But so often women experience the empty nest syndrome, and maybe you're going through that right now, but don't worry, it's not too late. Women will often experience the empty nest syndrome because they have poured so much of themselves into their children and made the children their whole world, their whole life, without keeping enough for themselves, so that when their children are no longer at home and have fled the nest, then they don't really know what to do with their time and can leave such a void in their life. And it can be so disorientating. It can feel so lonely. It can feel like you've been abandoned. You can feel so lost because your identity is shifting, because then who are you if you are not needed in that way? Who are you if you're not doing all of those things for your family? And I certainly experienced that with my mom. And at that point, I remember saying to myself, I will never do that. If I ever become a mother, I will make sure that my entire life is not just devoted to being just a mum. Not that there's anything wrong with that. Absolutely not. But I am Dharmi first and foremost. Then I might be someone's wife or someone's partner. Then I might be a mother. Then I am a daughter, and all of those other identities that we may attach ourselves to. But if Dharmi is not solid and secure in herself, then she'll crumble when any of those other things move or change or fall apart, which of course they can because they rely on other people. And despite having had all of those kind of conversations, and it's also the small things as well, like how maybe certain things that my mum never let me do or asked me to do or taught me was good. And this is all, a lot of this has come from doing the inner work on myself, especially within my business. You know, things like perfectionism I learned from my mom, and for the best part of my life, I thought it was something, a quality to be proud of, that I'm a perfectionist, and I would wear that badge with honor, like, yes, I'm a perfectionist. It's only when I started running my own business that I was like, holy crap, like that label, that badge that I wear with such pride is the one thing, or one of the main things, that is holding me back from achieving the success that I desire, that is preventing me from making progress and taking the action steps that I desire to move this business forward, to grow in the way that I want to grow and expand in the way that I want to expand. And then I realized and began to dismantle that. And I was just like, oh my gosh, that comes from my mom. That's something my mom taught me, because that's what she believes, and that's how she shows up in life. And she taught me that from a very young age, and I mirrored it. I emulated that, because I looked up to her. She was my number one role model. And sometimes when I'm speaking to my daughter and something will come out of my mouth and I catch myself and I'm like, why did I say that? I don't actually even believe in it. I think for a few years when she was younger, when she was really little, my daughter, initially I would say things like, don't sit on the grass. Without putting down a rug or something, you'll dirty your clothes. Or don't run out into the garden with your socks on or white socks on. Like, put some sandals on or something. You'll dirty your socks. Or stop playing with the muck and the mud or whatever it is she was doing. Like, my daughter is quite free and feral, and I love it, because I have allowed her to be. But these things would come out my mouth like, you'll get your clothes dirty. And then I'd catch myself and I'd be like, when you weigh things up, Dharmi, what's more important, that your child has the freedom to explore and experiment and be playful and just be a child, or that her clothes are going to get dirty, she may ruin them, it's going to be a little bit of extra washing for you to do, or maybe the stains will never come out, whatever, you're going to have to scrub them a little bit harder. Like, what's really important here? Where's the value? Where do you place value? Is it on like having things clean and tidy all the time? Or is it that your child has a really rich experience growing up of being free and exploring as a child should? And I've had to sort of reframe those things, because of course I want her to do that. I want her to be free. I want her to be feral. I want her to get her fingers in the mud and roll around on the grass and all of that. Don't get me wrong. Sometimes I'm like, enough is enough. I can't handle any more laundry this week. Just like, please, there's a cap here. Unless you want to learn how to use the washing machine, right? Then I'm cool with that. But I've had to sort of then go back and correct myself and go, no, it's okay. You know what? You play. Don't worry about it. It's fine. But the reason those things would come out of my mouth in the first place was because I was never allowed to do those things. Those were the things that my mother taught me. My mother taught me it was wrong to get dirty. My mother told me it was bad to get your clothes dirty, whether that's with dirt or grass stains or dropping food on your clothes. That was disapproved of, and my mother would be a little bit disappointed in me or a little bit upset, but the reality is she just had so much on her plate that it was just another thing for her to do. And there was no one that was going to help her with that workload. So for her, it was just another weight on her shoulders if I did create more work for her. And I get it. I totally get it. But my situation's very different. So why am I Why am I mirroring that? Why am I emulating those values, those beliefs with my own daughter? And now those are little examples, but it's in those little things in life that you begin to catch yourself, and perhaps you already have. But it's also in some of the bigger things as well, how we may speak up for ourselves or how we allow people to treat us or what we put up with in a relationship or at work or at society at large, or how much rest we allow ourselves or not. You, somebody whose mother was always on her feet from morning till night. I still have this one. I'm very aware of it, but I haven't quite broken the pattern or the cycle just yet. My mum would wake up before everybody else and she'd be on her feet, she'd be in the kitchen, she'd be doing things for everybody, this, that, and the other, and she hardly ever sat down. She never sat down. It was so rare. It was such a treat if she did, and I would immediately go over and cuddle next to her. I'm not saying I don't sit down. I'm sitting right now. But I still have a way to go. I am still very much that person, which is always doing, until I can't do any more. And then finally I collapse in bed. What I am learning to do is that in amongst all of that doing, I move slower. In amongst all of that doing, some of that doing is a lot of self-care doing. I am still doing stuff. That's the problem, right? I mean, that's what I still need to break. But I do fill it with activities like journaling or yoga or meditating or reading or, really nourishing activities, which is beautiful. And that's my way to move forward in breaking this cycle. But where I'm not yet is where I'm just able to just let it all be and just not do anything. Like the thought of that freaks me out. All right. One day. But 100% I adopt that from my mother, right? She still is that person to this day. And I've tired of trying to get her to slow down and get her to stop. Don't think she will break that cycle for herself. And that brings me to the next point, because we are in a position to break those cycles, and not only in a position to, but we really must break those cycles for ourselves, for our mothers who maybe never felt they could, maybe they didn't have the same opportunities or the same awareness, but also for our children, especially if you've got daughters, because we are their first role model too. And that has definitely helped me to break some of my cycles, because no matter how hard it might be and how much my subconscious mind just wants to revert back to what I learned as a child, what was demonstrated for me, I think about, do I want my daughter to do that? And I'm like, no way. That's when I'm like, okay, so even though it feels wrong, even though it feels uncomfortable, even though it feels hard, this is what I'm going to do instead. To the point where even when my daughter fought against it, so for example, another example was making time for myself when my daughter was about, oh gosh, it must have been about 3 years old or something. And I just needed some time out for myself from being mum, from being in a partnership, in a business. And I was like, there was a lot going on. And I wanted to go to a yoga class once a week. And she would bawl her eyes out and she would cling to me and pull at me and beg me. And my husband was supportive of me going away to do this one class a week. And then he's like holding her and she's like pulling at me and pulling at my hair and my clothes, like refusing for me to go and screaming at the top of her voice. And there'd be so much mum guilt. But hook or by crook, I would still get in that car and I would drive to my yoga class, not only because I really needed to, and it was so hard because the guilt that I would take with me all the way there and have while I was there and felt when I came back, because then she hadn't gone to bed and she'd be up waiting for me. Why did you go, mama? And like this, and I'm like, am I causing abandonment trauma here? You know, you go through all those kind of things. But ultimately, yes, I needed to go for me. But I also knew in my mind that this is something my mother would never have done for herself. And what am I teaching her? What am I teaching my daughter? I need to teach my daughter that it's important to make time for yourself, to put your needs first. Doesn't mean you don't love your family any less. Even if you are a mum, you have to put your needs first sometimes. And that was always at the forefront of my mind, which is what always helped me, gave me the courage to go. And, you know, the list of examples is long, right? The very, very long list here. But breaking these patterns can also bring up feelings of guilt as well. That are we judging our mothers in a way that we're saying, you didn't do a good job because I don't want to do things the way you did them. But that's not actually the case, is it? We are allowed to walk away when they may have endured things. We are allowed to speak up and have our voices heard in places where maybe they were silenced. We don't have to carry everything. We can put things down. We can ask for support. We can ask for the load to be shared in the places where our mothers carried it all. We don't honor our mothers by repeating their pain, by repeating their patterns. We're not saying you did a bad job. We're not saying you did anything wrong. We're just saying, I see everything you did and I thank you and I respect you and I love you for it. And I know that you did the best that you did with what you had in the best way you could. However, I am not going to repeat everything the way you did, because there was also a lot of pain. There was a lot of self-abandonment. There was a lot of people pleasing. There was a lot of silencing. There was a lot of being small. And I'm here to break that cycle for you, for your sacrifices, for me, and my future generations to come as well. It's where to begin is starting to notice what comes out of your mouth. What do you say? When you say something, sometimes maybe in your partnership, in your relationship, or as a mother, or in other areas of your life, if it makes you stop or just doesn't feel quite aligned, like, why did I say that? Just check in. Is that something your mum would have done? Where does that belief come from? Why did you say it? Did you say it out of habit? Is it really yours? Do you really believe what you're saying? And ask yourself, do you want to pass this on? Ask yourself if it is actually love or fear. Or is this wisdom or survival? Because the invitation here is not to rebel for the sake of rebelling, not to reject or to blame, but to break these cycles of self-abandonment. Because we can love our mothers, but still choose differently. We can understand our mothers, but not become them. We're allowed to honor all that she may have survived without making survival our own identity. We may have our mother's eyes, we may have our mother's hair, we may have our mother's smile and our mother's hands. But what we do not need to carry forward are her patterns, her pain, her limitations. What we do not need to carry forward is the way that she abandoned herself because of what was expected of her, because she had no other choice, because she didn't know any different, because she didn't have the support. You're allowed to pick and choose the things that your mother has taught you. Keep the things that serve you, but leave behind all the things that don't serve you. You can love your mother, honor her, respect her, but you do not have to become her. Before we finish today's episode, I just wanted to let my lovely local listeners know that I've created a brand new in-person offering called A Sacred Exhale. These are beautiful, reflective gatherings for women who are tired of carrying the stress and the heaviness of the week into their weekend and are craving a space to pause, breathe, reconnect, and reset in a more intentional way. Each session will be shaped around seasonal living, natural cycles, and lunar energies, weaving together a delicious fusion of practices such as meditation, breathwork, journaling, movement, intention setting, rituals, and soulful conversations. The gatherings are taking place at BWB The Collective in Whetstone in Leicestershire, and I'll pop the booking link in the show notes if your soul is whispering, "I need this." I would absolutely love to welcome you into this space. Thank you for joining me on this episode of High Self Mastery. If something landed, moved you, or sparked a shift, I'd love to hear from you. Be sure to follow, subscribe, and share this episode with a woman in your life that is also ready to rise. And if you found value in today's conversation, please take a moment to rate and review this podcast, especially in these early days. It really helps others to find this work too. If you're craving deeper support and sisterhood, join my mailing list using the link below, where you'll be the first to receive free meditations, learn about up-and-coming retreats, and other ways that we can work together. Until next time, honor your truth and trust in the timing of your becoming.